to be here, probably too much, to be here today to talk about a subject that has been in my mind for about 10 years. I would like to give you a little background why I'm interested in this subject. In my third company in 1986, I started doing neural networks with the intention to create a computer that could learn instead of being programmed. At that time, the AI community thought that artificial neural networks were really a bad idea. But I thought that was the only possibility to actually solve the fundamental problems of pattern recognition which were besetting AI. While I was studying neuroscience and biology, trying to understand how the brain works, or whatever we know about it, which is very little, I asked myself, but we are conscious, and all these books talk about signals, electrical signals, biochemical signals, and so on. How can those signals produce an experience? There is nothing in the laws of physics that tell us how to convert symbols like that, signals, electricity, into an experience, into sensations, emotions, thoughts, and spiritual feelings. At that time, I didn't know anything about spiritual feelings, but the first three were good enough. So, thanks. So, at that time, I was also very unhappy. I had achieved everything that the world had told me that if I did, I should be happy. I had a beautiful family. I was rich enough that I didn't have to work a single day more. And I was really distraught by that, because I didn't understand how is it possible, having achieved everything. I had fame enough that people knew me for what I had done. How is it possible to be so unhappy? And at the same time, I was trying to understand what consciousness is. And it was then that I had an experience. The experience, there is no time to tell, but fundamentally it was a mystical experience, what physicists usually talk about to disqualify somebody from science. Because if you have a mystical experience, something must be wrong with you. Well, that experience changed my life. It was so insignificant, so ridiculous, that it changed my life. It only lasted less than a minute. And I went from this way to that way. And what was that change? It was a change of a point of view. I always perceived myself as an entity, as a body, working, moving in a world that is not me. So I was separate from the world, observing the world, but separate from it. And that experience told me that I am the world. I am the world that observes itself with a point of view, which is myself. So I am a point of view of the world, observing the world. And the world, you know what it's made of? Of a substance that is love. And it's so powerful and so deep that I never felt such a love as deep as that. So that is what changed my life. So for 20 years, I studied consciousness, studied myself, spending 30-40% of my time I was a night worker, so to speak, studying my consciousness, my inner life, what brought me to this world, what do I mean, what do I want. And then during the day I was running a company. So I had two wings. And 20 years later, after working this was 10 years ago, after working for 20 years on this, and also thinking, how could I connect dots here? How can we have a physical world, which is an outer world, we perceive as an outer world in ourselves, and at the same time be one? And it is then that I realized that consciousness cannot be produced entirely and solely by the brain. In other words, matter, inert matter, which is the matter that physicists talk about, cannot produce consciousness. Consciousness is a property that is irreducible. It must be there before anything, before space, before time, before matter, and before the energy that we call energy. So that's where I decided that at that point that I wanted to investigate that, because that kind of viewpoint would allow a real union between science and spirituality, because spirituality to me is an inner experience. It is an experiment within, and science is an experiment without. So we have something here that can be connected, which is the experiential nature of reality. Not a thought, not an imagination, something that can be experienced. And so, which is different from a dogma. You have to experience it. And that experience tells you that it is true, if you go deep enough within. So for the last 10 years, I've been trying to develop a model of consciousness, but then it soon became a model of reality, a model of how the world is constructed. And so now I will talk about some of the results, some of the ideas that came along with that ride, to try to answer a major question today. Are there fundamental differences between artificial and human intelligence? Many of us think there are, and others think no. I mean, computers are made of matter, just like our brain, so we should have conscious computers. And that's what most of the AI practitioners think. So let's go on the subject. So, a few words about artificial intelligence. It is about machines that behave with intelligence similar to ours. They reason. By reasoning here, I mean simply the symbolic reasoning that we do, because we mix intuition with reasoning. So the kind of reasoning we do is not quite the same. They recognize patterns. They learn by example, where we give the name of the object that they are supposed to recognize to learn. So we provide a fundamental information, and the neural network finds the correlations with the automatically that exist in the data that has that label. So it's a conversion from a type of complex information into another symbol, which is the name of that complex information. But they also learn by themselves, and that gets a little scary. Now we read that artificial intelligence based on artificial neural networks may soon surpass humans. Some researchers even claim that in less than 40 years, computers will be conscious. And these claims are not silly claims. I mean, they're backed up by very important results. Some researchers have found that you can train a computer to play a game by giving the rules of the game and having that computer play with another computer and be even better than a computer that has been learned, coached by a human being. This is the result of AlphaGo Zero, which is one of the kind of examples. My goodness, what's going on? I have here the new slides, and here nobody told me anything. Sorry, guys. I mean, this is crazy. So what's going on here? How come that it doesn't? I haven't said much that wasn't there, so because I was still talking about my life, and there was no slides about that. So what I said, that the claims of the AI practitioners are backed up by impressive results, like winning against the world champions of chess, Jeopardy, and Go. And Go, of course, was considered a very difficult game because it has many more combinations than chess. And the winning with the world champion of Go was not a trivial winning. It was 100-0. The computer won 100 games to 0. That's how impressive it was. Then AlphaGo Zero, that I mentioned there, is a different program where a computer is given the rules of the game, and then is structured in a certain way, and then it goes and plays with another computer with the same rules. They play together, and then AlphaGo Zero play with the program that won 100-0, the world champion, and they won 100-0 with that. Computer art, some of you may see computer art and you think that it's done by a human being. So what is the difference between us and a computer? Self-driving vehicles, those are coming. They will take another 20 years, 30 years before they are with us, but I'm sure they will be with us for simple reasons, but I don't have time to explain. Right now we have to move on. But then should we take seriously these promises? Can AI truly challenge human intelligence? What crucially distinguishes human from artificial intelligence? For example, is conscious comprehension indispensable to intelligent behavior? And what about emotions, intuitions, imagination, and spiritual awakenings? To what extent are we the ones who attribute or project our intelligence and other human properties to our machines, properties that we put into them without fully realizing it? Now I check. So here's the approach I want to follow to pursue this line of thinking, because these questions are no longer philosophical. Today, AI poses a serious challenge to our understanding of the nature of life, the nature of consciousness, and ultimately the nature of reality. We cannot leave it to the philosophers anymore. The difficulty to explaining life, consciousness, and unifying quantum field theory with general relativity point to the likely inadequacy of our current fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. In other words, physicists have tried for 80 years to create a unified theory of general relativity and quantum field theory. They have not succeeded. They have tried to explain, to interpret quantum field theory in terms that we can understand. Nobody can understand it. And so on. So something must be wrong in the conceptual foundations that we have about the nature of everything, of reality. That includes the inner reality, even though physicists generally consider that epiphenomenal or something to leave to the, to the brain surgeons or to the neuroscientists. Now, the current materialist framework posits that quantum fields interacting in space-time account for the entire description of reality. However, the natures of space, time, the quantum vacuum, out of which the entire universe emerged somehow, how can it happen? Out of nothing comes a universe. Information and the observer, among many others, are not understood. And I mean, not understood at all. I've gone to conferences with the top physicists about the nature of the observers, and I was so disgusted because the top physicists did not even want to define the observer, because they wanted a definition, because they couldn't agree on a definition. They had tried before, they couldn't agree on one, so they didn't want to define it. So what are we here for? You know, we were in a conference to talk about the nature of the observer, nobody wanted to talk about the observer. Everybody wanted to talk about their favorite theory because that's all they know. We are growing into silos, and we all, you know, every specialist wants to talk about their thing. And that's it. So, after many inner experiences and much study, I think we need a broader conceptualization in which consciousness is an irreducible property of nature, not an emergent phenomenon produced by the brain, and even less an epiphenomenon, which is most people that are positivists think. In other words, it is just us, we believe we are conscious, but you're not conscious, really, you know. Really? I mean, consciousness is what gives meaning to our life, but that doesn't matter, you know, because we cannot, since we cannot explain it, we shove it aside. Such new framework must contain, however, current physics as a special case and produce novel, falsifiable predictions together with explanations and interpretations that are better than the available ones. So it is not a simple thing to just say, oh, well, you know, they don't know anything what they're talking about. I had to come up with a solution, something better, something that helps join the two sides, the two sides of the coin, the inner and the outer. So let's start with information and symbols, because here there is a fundamental issue. The concept of information, we all know, has revolutionized both our science and our lives. Witness the iPhone. When scientists speak of information, they mean Shannon information. Now, Shannon actually did not define information, he only defined the quantity of information. The quantity of information carried by a symbol. Now, in the language of Shannon, a symbol is like a sign in the language of, what do you call
Deep psychology.
Deep psychology or whatever. I mean, the people that study languages, you know, consider a sign is something that stands for something. So this may be, we all know it's a glass, but I can say, well, if you see a glass, it means that I will be at the bar tonight at 5. If we agree with that, we are given an abstract symbol to this glass that we all agree. So if you see a glass, I will be at 5 in the bar. So that's really what Shannon information is. And then the probability of seeing the glass is the probability of existence of a symbol. So the quantity of information carried by a symbol is the co-logarithm. Don't get confused by that. It's just a name to say that, you know, inversely proportional to the probability that such a symbol might appear next to a string of symbols. So in this formulation, the higher the probability, the lower is the quantity of information that is carried by that symbol. Which makes sense, the information for us is, to some extent, is the degree of surprise that we have by seeing something. So if the surprise is very high, then it means that the probability of appearance of that symbol is very low. If I see a dog, the probability of seeing a dog is not very, very, very low. I mean, it's a common thing, but to see a dog that is with the head of a cat is a pretty low probability. So that symbol would carry a high uncertainty and therefore high information. Shannon information is abstract information, information without meaning. So it's really a sign, appropriate only to the description of computers and communication systems for which meaning is irrelevant. In a computer, so far, meaning has been irrelevant, the same in the communication system. We are the ones giving meaning to the symbols. So meaning is outside the theory of information, attributed to the abstract symbol the meaning is attributed to the abstract symbols by implicit or explicit human agreements. For example, in a computer, a bit in a particular node of the circuit has a meaning which is implicit. It's implicit by this structure, which is a static structure of the circuit. Therefore, the meaning is implicit. The computer doesn't know the meaning, but it means that because that causes something else to happen in a certain way. For us, meaning is given by human agreement most of the time. Shannon called the average quantity of information carried by a string of symbols information entropy. It happens that the negative of information entropy has the same form of thermodynamic entropy, a major concept in physics. And this coincidence, the fact that the form of the two are identical, say for a sign, led physicists to successfully apply the concept of information to physical systems. So, wow, look at this. A bridge between physics and information theory, where before physics never talked about information. Before information theory, information didn't mean anything for physicists. Physicists were only talking about matter, energy, movement, etc., etc. So, recently, some physicists have derived Maxwell, Schrödinger, Dirac equations, and quantum field theory from 6 purely informational postulates. No ontological postulate, no physical postulate. 6 informational postulates. Dariano is a friend of mine, and is the head of the theoretical physicist group at Pavia University, and his collaborators. They worked for about 15 years to be able to do that, and that is a major result because what it's telling us, it tells us the physical reality is entirely made of meaningless symbols organized by the equation of physics, and the fundamental symbol is a qubit. It's the extension, the generalization of the bit of the computers. The bits of the computers can be 1 or 0. The qubit can be anything between 0 and 1, so it has an infinite number of values. But when it appears in this reality, it will assume the value 0 or 1, because you cannot have a continuum number. This reality is quantum, and the quantum of information in this reality is the Boolean bit 0 or 1. So, based on this understanding now of physics, it is very clear the meaning cannot exist in either computers or living organisms. In other words, based on the laws of physics, there is no meaning, and so we should not be conscious. Computers are not conscious, but neither should we be conscious. But we know that we are conscious. I know that I'm conscious within myself. I don't know if you are. I cannot prove it, and actually you cannot prove from any outside measurement that I am conscious. So that's a fundamental problem here. No external measurement can prove that I'm conscious. Can only give correlations, but cannot prove that I'm conscious. So we also live simultaneously in 2 worlds. The inner world of physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, and spiritual feelings, what philosophers call qualia, and the outer world of quantum fields that interact in space and time. That's what physicists study. Consciousness is what accounts for the inner world of qualia, which are the carriers of meaning. Qualia are the carriers of meaning because we care about the meaning. Qualia is simply the appearance in the sensations and feelings that we prove, but the feelings carry meaning. And so there is here we are not talking about qualia as the essence of real information. The meaning is the essence of real information. So physics and the existence of consciousness cannot arise from abstract symbols, as we have just said. So physics cannot tell us how to convert electrical or biochemical signals into qualia, and even less into meaning. Those are two separate concepts, qualia and meaning. Current physics describes a meaningless world simply because the meaning has been defined away. Not because it's meaningless. So, we can now either deny or accept the existence of consciousness. We can believe that our consciousness is epiphenomenal and the world will continue to go on. But if we believe that we are conscious, then physics is incomplete. Physics without consciousness, without explaining within its fundamental assumptions the nature of consciousness, is not covering the all of reality as they claim to do. So, consciousness must exist as an irreducible property of physical reality from the beginning, like the electrical charge and the spin. We couldn't have electricity in our, which is macroscopic, the macroscopic aspect of electrical charge and spin in our macroscopic world if those properties didn't exist at the level of the quantum fields. And consciousness is even more, incredibly rich than, electromagnetism and than electromagnetism. In fact, we were going along very well without electromagnetism 300 years ago. We didn't even know they existed. We were explaining reality. We were, we had theories. All the early, all the classical physics before Maxwell equations and before Faraday and so on. Back in the mid 1700, early 1700. We didn't know anything about electricity and magnetism. And now we explain almost everything about all chemistry is explained by electromagnetic forces. So consciousness is even deeper than that. So now I believe that we are conscious. So for the last 10 years, since I came to this conclusion, preliminary conclusion, that consciousness must be irreducible, I put lots of energy, lots of effort, working full time, in trying to develop a model of reality based on consciousness being primary. So I will describe a model now. It's my model. It may be wrong, for sure. There may be many things that are wrong, but at least it's an attempt to connect the dots between what we know about physics and what I know experientially about consciousness. Not because I read into books, because of what I experience. That's a big difference. So, to account for the existence of consciousness within current physics, we must assume that the quantum fields, which are the entities out of which everything is made, must also possess an inner and an outer reality where the two uniquely reflect each other, just like we do. We have an inner reality made of meaning. My outer reality is my communications to you in this moment. And I communicate with you with symbols, the words that I use, the gestures that I make, what you can gather by looking at me from the outside. But you cannot look at my private inner experience. Nobody can. In fact, in quantum physics, the quantum state of a system cannot be cloned. There is a no cloning theorem. It means that a quantum state of a system is private and unique to that system. So, in this framework, the inner reality is semantic, meaning, the meaning, and the outer reality is informational. You get information from my gesturing, and the two are indivisible aspects of the same reality. So I'm talking about a reality made of two sides, of two aspects, which is the aspect of the reality within that knows itself as itself, and from without you can also get the sense that what you're observing is a identity. And you observe, try to understand the meaning of that identity by these symbols that self, because I'm talking about selves now, manifest. So when I say that we have these two aspects and the two are indivisible, the information that you can see from outside must be inseparable from its meaning. It cannot be abstract information, because abstract information, signs are simply, they are signs that, you know, the meaning is given by the agreement of implicit or explicit. So I call this type of information live information. Live information is carried by live symbols. So there's a big difference between signs or abstract information and live information. The information of entities that are conscious, that have those two aspects, inner and outer. So entities with these properties are vaster than the quantum fields of physics, and I call them conscious quantum fields to distinguish them. They are selves, each endowed with consciousness and agency. So those are the two properties of the selves. They are conscious and they have agency. Consciousness is defined as the capacity of which a conscious quantum field to know itself directly within itself. That is direct self-knowing at this level. We are more complicated than that, but let's stick to the quantum fields. This defines the identity of the self. I know myself directly to exist as an identity. I am me. That is the identity. The consciousness of the self can also perceive and comprehend the identity of the other conscious quantum fields through their outer live information. So, just like you observing me, you say, oh, it's another conscious self. So you can identify me as a self from the outside. Now, perception and comprehension are the two fundamental properties of consciousness. Then perception simply transforms live symbols into qualia, and comprehension transforms qualia into meaning. That's why perception and comprehension are two different animals. Perception simply gets you qualia. Comprehension gets you meaning. And that is when you observe from outside. From inside, perception and comprehension are collapsed into one. You cannot distinguish perception from meaning, from comprehension. They are intertwined. It's indistinguishable. We only get the meaning. Thus, perception and comprehension of outer reality are mediated by symbols. Agency is the capacity of the conscious quantum field to act upon itself with free will. See, we think that in physics we think that a quantum field interacts with another. But in this model, the interaction is simply a communication. It's just a communication. And the communication starts by a self emitting a live symbol. A live symbol is its state, which is, is its state, and the other understanding, perceiving and understanding that. So, through their communications, the conscious quantum fields know themselves and each other. So, knowing themselves is a fundamental issue here, a fundamental aspect. Eventually, I make this as a postulate, a fundamental postulate. Conscious quantum fields also combine with each other to create the hierarchical reality that we observe. Atoms, molecules, macromolecules, cells, animals, ecosystems, and there you go. However, communication requires the development of syntactical rules of symbols that must be obeyed by all communicators. If I want to talk to you, I better use the syntactical laws of symbols, otherwise you don't understand me. But these laws are agreements that are voluntarily obeyed. They're not laws of physics like physics believes, coercing everything to work according to those rules. It's an agreement. In this framework, these hierarchical, voluntary syntactical rules are what scientists call laws of physics. The holistic reality described by quantum field theory and general relativity requires that each self be a part whole of one. In other words, it's a holistic system that is made of fields. A field is a part whole. You cannot take a field out of it and then put it back together. It is inherent in the space and time, because space and time are the common aspects of all the fields. In fact, space, I claim, is made also by conscious selves that are below the radar screen, so to speak, that combine together and create the background of everything else, and so that the quantum fields are all made of space plus other conscious entities that are not part of space. So they stick out from space, and we perceive space as nothing, and we only perceive objects sticking out, but the objects are made of space too. So, one, in this case, I said part wholes of one. One is the totality of what exists. Not only, but also what can potentially exist. Because one is not already made up. Many spiritual traditions talk of one as omniscient. Well, an omniscient one knows everything, so if you start with the presupposition or the axiom that one wants to know itself, there is nothing to know. He already knows everything, so what's the point of us being here, for example? So it doesn't make any sense. One is always becoming, is always getting bigger, knowing more. And the real space, the ontological space, is the space of self-knowing. It's not this physical space. It's the space of self-knowing. That is what expands. We see this space expanding. That's how we perceive, through our body, something else. So self, consciousness, and agency are really inseparable aspects of one. Now, there is a deeper model here that I have absolutely no time to go, which is what is one and how one creates consciousness units, which are the units that create space, and all of this is too much. It will take another hour, so I cannot go there. I need to start, to close in, start with somewhere in the middle. But there is an entire model to explain how space emerges and how conscious quantum fields emerge and so on. Now, one is irreducibly holistic and dynamic, and the dynamism of existence is the expression of the never fully satisfied urge. I don't know what else to call it, because obviously urge is a human term, but some movement, some desire, call it whatever you want, of one to know itself. So one wants to know itself. We are expressions of one. Many orders of hierarchy above the glimpses that one has to itself. Every glimpse of one creates a conscious unit, and that conscious unit then becomes a live, evolving self that wants to know itself. And through that, one knows itself. And so there is no time to go through that. But physics describes and recognizes only the reality of abstract symbols because it considers the quantum fields to be qubits organized by physical laws devised by human beings. Qubits are the generalization of Shannon's abstract information, which are Boolean bits, to quantum physics. And I said already something about them earlier. So notice that within quantum field theory, there are only fields. Particles do not exist as we imagine them. Particles are really a leftover of classical physics, of Democritus' atoms, something hard, bounded, that bounces against each other, out of which everything is made. That's gone. Physics today only recognizes quantum fields, and what we call particle-excited states of the fields do not exist as bounded objects. We are fields. We exist everywhere. And that's why we can project the information that we have captured from what's out here into a world that we see outside of us. You think that a robot can actually take information from the world and then able to project that into the experience of a world outside? The experience of the world outside is because we are a field. You are in my field. What I see is in my field. You see me, and I am a figure that you construct in your brain in your field. Notice that within quantum field theory, I already said that, sorry. However, the quantum fields of physics do not even represent the live information of the conscious quantum fields. They only represent some reduced aspect of it. Because the live information of the conscious quantum fields are irreducible from their meaning, and qubits are simply abstract information. They are signs, and that's it. That's all that we can get out of the live information for what we know now. The only way to get to the live information is with our consciousness. We can explore the world with our consciousness. Our consciousness can have access to live information, but our instruments cannot. The conscious quantum fields share the urge of one to know itself. They communicate and combine, co-evolving a hierarchy of selves, a hierarchy of meaning, and a hierarchy of life symbols, which are languages, whose physical counterparts are what we call atoms, molecules, macromolecules, etc. So let's revisit the symbols now, based on what I just said. Because let's consider the consciousness of a stone within the proposed framework. A stone is made of a random aggregation of a variety of crystallites with amorphous material, all in close proximity. The inner reality of the stone is made of an ensemble of the inner realities of the organization of conscious quantum fields of which it is composed. The stone, however, is not a conscious self with consciousness and agency as a stone. It's like a crowd of people, where a crowd of people is made of conscious agents, a crowd of people, animals, and everything else. They are conscious selves, but the conscious selves each has their own agency, and so they don't create a single agent, which would be the consciousness of a crowd. There is no consciousness of a crowd. So, the crowd is not a conscious self, even though each entity in the crowd is conscious and aware of being part of the crowd. In other words, there is no stone self with a unique identity, free will, and the conscious perspective of a unified self that can direct the actions of the stone. There is only a stone ensemble. And the stone ensemble consists of the sum of the inner and outer realities of the many cells that form the ensemble. This is because each life symbol is controlled by a different self, therefore they cannot make a coherent self of the stone. I call that type of symbol a live incoherent symbol. It's made of live symbols, but the totality of the symbol is incoherent because each symbol is controlled by a different self. Now let's look at the consciousness of a living organism. By contrast, a living cell is a self in which the various organelles that make up the cell are integrated, not some, integrated in some deep way to form a cell self with its own unique consciousness and agency. Each organelle, in turn, integrates the consciousness of the macromolecules of which it is made, and so on, all the way down to the consciousness of the conscious quantum fields. Thus, in a cell, there is a coherent chain of being from the conscious quantum fields to the cell self. A cell is therefore a hierarchical organization of conscious quantum fields. It is a field of fields with a semantic inner reality and an outer reality made of live, coherent information. So this is coherent information, because it is not disconnected from the consciousness of the conscious quantum fields. It is a chain of being continuously and ends in a self of a higher order. That's why a cell can reproduce itself as a self, as a unity. So ultimately, the consciousness and the free will of the cell self arise from the consciousness and the free will of the conscious quantum fields. A cell is a quantum of life whose body is what we perceive of its live, coherent information when it is transformed by the physical instruments that we use and the sensory brain systems of our body. So it's a transformation of a transformation of a transformation, and we perceive the physical body as that. But that's a far cry from what it actually is. To get the full meaning carried by the live information of a cell self that exists in more than one reality, certainly it doesn't exist just in physical reality, it exists in the quantum world, would require a level of comprehension human beings have yet to achieve. A living organism is a special type of live, coherent symbol created by a self to experience aspect of itself within a virtual universe, which is our physical world, with the ultimate purpose of knowing itself. The body is a hierarchical structure of live, coherent symbols that are open, dynamic, and breathing. They are made of a hierarchy of other live, coherent symbols that continuously flow in and out of it, what we call the environment. We are in the environment. I breathe about 10,000 liters of air a day. You do the same. And what I breathe in is not what I breathe out. I'm everywhere. But we perceive ourselves, we are educated to perceive ourselves inside the body, and only with extraordinary experience of consciousness can we actually reach out and experience a reality which is far vaster than what the ego sees. The ego is, Brother David yesterday, is the part of the self that believes to be the body. That's it. That's the ego. But the emotions don't belong to the ego. They are projected into the ego. They belong to a self that is vaster. Our thoughts are even vaster, and our spiritual nature is even vaster. So the consciousness inhabiting the live coherent symbol, which is the body, is a fragment of the consciousness of the self who created the body. The body is not a machine. It has been studied as a machine or as a system. It is not a system nor a machine. It is a quantum structure far more complex and sophisticated than we currently imagine, because it must contain symbolic and semantic continuity with a chain of selves that starts from the conscious quantum fields. We had to start over here. So, I'm finally getting to the answer to the question, can a digital computer become conscious? The answer is no, and I'll tell you why. A Boolean bit is an abstract symbol. It is a sign. It is a human convention respected in all electronic circuits. It is like saying, if the number of electrons present in a node of a circuit is more than 1,000 above the average, the state of the node is 1. If it is less than 100, the state of the node is 0. If it is between 100 and 1,000, the state of the node is undetermined. That's what a bit is in its representation in a computer, which is a physical thing. The bit is the simplest abstract symbol that can possibly exist in our physical universe. it is the elementary quantum of abstract information, meaningless per se. The meaning of the bit is given by an implicit or an explicit agreement, as I mentioned earlier. The bit is not a life symbol that inherently and unambiguously expresses the inner meaning of a self. The meaning of a bit comes from the individual consciousnesses of a community of selves who have agreed to uphold it. The matter of which a computer is made consists of live, incoherent symbols, like in the stone examples that I gave you before, forced to carry abstract symbols defined by human convention. Thus, computers will never be conscious, no matter how complex. Complexity has nothing to do with consciousness. It may be possible, however, to construct an AI virtual reality where a portion of our consciousness separates from some time, believing to be the artificial intelligence body, the avatar, operating in AI reality. But the consciousness comes from us, not from the computer. It is our consciousness that is projected into a character in a virtual reality, and we can become addicted to that or hypnotized by that, believing that we are the thing. Because that's the property of consciousness, to be able to actually, focus in a particular way, pay attention only to certain signals and not to others. We normally pay attention only to the signals produced by our body. We don't pay attention to the spiritual signals that are all over us, the thoughts of others that are all around us, because we haven't learned to do, because we don't think we can. But nobody taught us. But I had many experiences that tell me that that is possible. But it requires training. But it requires training also to solve the equations of physics. So in this case, in the case of an avatar, if the identification of our consciousness with the avatar were strong, the qualia arising from the physical world may appear to us as unphysical, as some of our emotions now feel to most of us while we are identified with the avatar. When we exit from the game, wow, we are in this other reality now. I thought I was there. Oh, now we are in this reality. That's what happens. We are hypnotized. Conscience can hypnotize us into believing that we are what we experience. So, I think that we simultaneously exist actually in more realities than the physical reality, because we have emotions that have completely different set of feelings than physical reality. This is sensation of physical reality. Thoughts are completely different too. And spiritual feelings are completely different too. So we have quantum physics is probably the physics of the emotional self. I don't know that. I haven't gone far enough. But it is a reality that has nothing to do with the physical. When it comes into the physical, it has to collapse into where in the emotions we have many states in superposition. But then when we are, when we eventually get to the meaning of that emotion within that physical body, it is only one of those meanings. So one state is only possible within the physical reality. The physical reality is like a virtual reality, actually. But we think that it is the only thing that exists. That's why the identification with our consciousness within our body is not absolute. Otherwise, we cannot perceive emotions, thoughts, and spiritual feelings in superposition with our physical sensation. As I'm speaking, I see you. I also feel my emotions. I also feel my thoughts. And also, in this moment, I don't feel any spiritual feelings because I'm, trying to convey. I'm focused in conveying the information in my talk. But those are not physical. We think they're physical because we think we are the body, so they must be all physical. But those are not physical either. So, if to the extent that we disconnect from our real emotions, we would also disconnect from our real thoughts, because you had to follow that chain of being. We also disconnect from our real thoughts and our real spiritual feelings. We substitute real emotions to fake emotions, real thoughts to knowledge, which is repetition, like a machine would do, repetition of what somebody else has said, not our real thoughts, turning ourselves into mechanical beings only with ego consciousness. That's what we do most of the time. And what society, in some ways, what AI practitioners, the people that have power, would like us to believe, that we are machines, so the machines they build will be better than us, and so that they can control us. We have to wake up. Conclusion. Even though robots and computers are made of matter that is conscious per se, they cannot become conscious selves, no matter or complex, because they are incoherent organizations of conscious quantum fields. Only living organisms have the extraordinary quantum physical structure capable of maintaining the symbolic and semantic coherence with the conscious quantum fields, which are the ontological units of which all physical entities are made. Robots will only be able to imitate the true comprehension of a conscious self. When physicists insist that meaning cannot exist at the level of the quantum fields, they reduce physical reality to pure mathematics, i.e. abstract symbols organized by rule imposed by them, which are called the laws of physics. Current physics only describes a virtual reality where consciousness cannot exist. By doing so, the natural reality is greatly distorted by the elimination of the inner world, the part of reality that gives freedom and meaning to existence. At the root of the problem is the physicalist stance in which the heart is being cut out by the unwise decision that only the rational mind is important. Thank you very much.